Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to say happy Friday to all Nunavummiut, who I'm sure are joining all of our fellow Canadians in rejoicing last night's victory. I'm sure that he who shall not be named, the American president must be furious right about now and will likely call the game rigged. Mr. Speaker, my questions today are for the Premier regarding Arctic security and sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, we are truly living in turbulent times, and I believe that it's very fair to say that there's never been so much anxiety and uncertainty for people of the Arctic. In recent months, the world has been hearing alarming talk of annexation and assimilation. Mr. Speaker, if we're going to claim to assert Arctic sovereignty in our own nation, then we must be prepared to back our words with action. Mr. Speaker, on February 7th, I emailed our Premier in advance of his meeting with the Council of Federation, as well as their joint mission to Washington. In the email, I requested that the Premier seize this opportunity to advocate for the establishment of a Canadian Armed Forces base here in Iqaluit, and that it be manned by newly formed Nunavut Regiment. Again, Mr. Speaker, I would like to note that I was equally surprised by the Leader of the Opposition's announcement, similar announcement here in Iqaluit on February 10th. However, Mr. Speaker, I believe that establishing a permanent Canadian Armed Forces base in Iqaluit would bring a significant amount of employment and, equally important, federal investment in dual-use infrastructure. And with regards to the creation of a Nunavut Regiment, I believe that enhancing Inuit Rangers beyond its current limited mandate by the Canadian Armed Forces would be a game changer for Nunavut and, more importantly, our youth. So I'd like to ask, for the record, will the Premier confirm our government's support for the Arctic security enhancements that I've just spoken of? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Premier of Nunavut, Mr. Parusiakeko.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for his question as well as his email that he had sent on February 7. As we all know and are feeling, each and every one of us, not only here in Nunavut, but right across this country, the claim about the 51st state is really targeting our sovereignty as a very proud country that we are. And that jab is something that we're taking very seriously as a country. I was very fortunate recently to have, just as I mentioned in my minister's statement, just had gone to Washington, D.C., with all my premier colleagues from across this country to show the unity that we are seeing across this country and for us to assert our sovereignty as a country. And as such, I share my colleagues' sentiments in terms of that we have to seize this moment, and we do see an opportunity for nation building to happen from coast to coast and then to the northern coast that has been neglected. With that in mind, I mentioned the Washington trip just yesterday. I had a First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister as well as Minister Blair, as well as all the premiers from across this country, where in that meeting we talked about Arctic security and sovereignty and further discussed the importance of seeing investments. To the member's question, we have not pushed for whether we support or not a military base here in Nunavut. What we've been saying is that we are open to have those conversations. It's important that Northerners are at the table to discuss the very important topic that was brought up. But we are open to it, and I very much look forward to having deeper conversations to see what that could look like in the very near future with my colleagues here, as well as Inuit organizations as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
First supplementary, Mr. Lightstone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the Premier for that response. As the Premier had previously indicated, he joined the Canadian premiers in the mission to Washington, D.C. I'd like to ask if the Premier, if he could inform the House about what specific discussions he had with U.S. lawmakers and officials about the issue of Arctic security. And I'd also like to ask if the Premier can inform the House about what sort of reaction he received. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Premier of Nunavut, Mr. Iqaluit.
Speaker, I thank my colleague for that question. Really, the Washington trip really allowed us to be able to tell our story, in particular as Northern Premiers, between myself, my good friends in the NWT and Yukon, to talk about the potential of seeing nation building. During our meetings, as I indicated in my minister's statement, we really emphasized the nation building projects that are being led here in this territory. In particular, I'm looking at the Arctic Security Corridor, which is the Grays Bay Road and Port project, which I know has the full support of all the members here, and that's an Inuit-led, Inuit-driven project. I had the ability to mention the Iqaluit hydro fiber link, and I know that's been of significant importance here in this House as well. As a transmission line and a connectivity line, that would be nation building as well. The Iqaluit hydro project was one that I've mentioned as a nation-building opportunity as well that could connect the capital, but also the largest consumer of diesel in the territory to that. And with the discussions about the improvements to the FOB, or the forward operating sites, any new investment will require support in infrastructures, such as power, among other things. So I brought that up, as well as the Iqaluit deep sea port being one where it's right on the Northwest Passage entry point, and one that's dual use. And so through those infrastructure projects, we did discuss about the opportunity of securing energy, but in particular critical minerals, and the potential for Nunavut to play a big role in opening up markets and tapping into the incredible resource that we have here in the territory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Second and final supplementary, Mr. Lightstone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nunavut and Greenland enjoy a very unique relationship. Our Inuit heritage and language have endured despite a history of colonization and assimilation. Mr. Speaker, I stand with our neighbors to the east when I hear them say that Greenland is not for sale. I'd like to ask, can the Premier expand on what sort of discussions he has had with the Greenlandic government to support their right to sovereignty and self-determination? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Premier of Nunavut, Mr. Iqaluit.
Mr. Speaker, the engagement that I've had was actually just the one in Washington, where I was very fortunate to meet with the representatives from Greenland, as well as the ambassador of Denmark. Really, as a courtesy visit, we do share not only a border, but we do share language, culture, and family with our very deep, close friends of Greenland. As the House knows, back in 2022, we had signed a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to strengthen that relationship, where we've wanted to look at strengthening opportunities in fisheries, tourism, and bringing movement of people, which we've seen the successful launch of the link between Iqaluit and Nuuk. But during that meeting, we really talked about broader topics of Arctic security, what more we could do in terms of strengthening our ties, whether it's fisheries or whether it's sports, as was noted as well. But we didn't get into the specifics of the conversation of the U.S. president. That's really up to the people of Greenland, and I respect their sovereignty around what they want to see. But we always stand firm as our northern friend, as our northern family, that we support their ambitions as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
More questions? Member